Okay, everybody, welcome back. Another episode of This Week on Main Street. And this week is going to be a little bit different. And I have to start it with a little bit of a disclosure here, because this week I'm bringing on some of my colleagues, my friends, and my partners in this whole crazy world we call proactivity, which, if you've been following along, has really kind of birthed the whole Main Street Marathon initiative and really has brought us here to the Rise community. And one of the things we are so excited about is what is coming out of Proactivity Innovations. So today I have the lead of Proactivity Innovations, Mr. Nick Path, who is going to be taking us through some of the kind of latest and greatest ways that he is and his team are continuing to utilize technology to help us not only make informed decisions about our life, but also our athletic journey. And as it relates to that, we brought in both Rise and Proactivity Run Performance coach, Dr. Aaron Perez, who has been using some of the technologies developed by that Proactivity Innovations team to really help people on their journey. So guys, welcome to This Week on Main Street.
Thanks for having me, Eric.
Likewise. Thanks for having me. Excited to be here.
Yeah, guys, it's good. It's kind of fun, to talk to you guys on a show and actually get to see your face. Most times these days, we're usually on phone calls, not so much Zoom calls. So it's good to see you guys, Nick, nice and clean shaven, ready to rock and roll today. This is good.
Yep.
This is good. So Nick, we've kind of been peppering this, kind of thing you've been building, you and the group have been building. And, if folks who are watching this had been with us earlier in the year when Aaron came out from Chicago and did a run performance coaching seminar, he talked about some of the innovations you guys are both exploring and now have kind of taken to the next level. We've kind of put it out there that Scissors is sponsoring This Week on Main Street this week. So tell us a little bit about what you guys are up to, what we're calling Scissors. Tell us, where did this whole thing come from, Nick?
Sure. Yeah. So I think just to kind of start, I'll give a little bit of my background and kind of how I got into this stuff. But, I came to Proactivity as an electrical engineer out of college. But I was always an athlete. And so basically came out, with that premise to kind of work with athletes, but always kind of worked with Proactivity on kind of like the data side. We've always been data driven as far as having databases and things to inform, how we work with our clients and our athletes. So I was a wrestler in college and in high school, and because I couldn't wrestle anymore, like most of us, I got involved in endurance running and endurance sports. And, after, reading some of the crazy books that we read, like Born to Run and things like that, decided I would give ultra marathoning a try, even though I hadn't even run my first marathon. So, kind of created this 4-year plan where I was going to start with a marathon and eventually get to a 100-miler, and quickly learned that just running and training wasn't the only part of the equation. Recovery was so important. And as I trained for my first 50-miler trail run, I did mostly trail running, was always really sore. My only recovery tactic was ice baths and things like that. And shortly after that, listened to Rich Roll's book, Finding Ultra. And, he's the one who really kind of talked about plant-based eating as a form of performance enhancement. So as I kind of prepared for the final 100-miler, which happened in 2014, got into plant-based eating for about 6 months leading into that 100%, had cut out alcohol consumption and things like that, and really just focused on the recovery side. But anyway, along the way, I kind of used the tools that were out there, Training Peaks, and it really helped me to dial in my training, to help me understand if I was training enough, but not overtraining. And, really just kind of started to understand how using the data could really help me to perform better and help me to prepare better. But there were some things missing, and it also kind of ties back to, about that same time in our facility, we started using a heart rate monitoring system with our athletes during their training sessions. And what we found with kind of both those cases is it was great to understand your training session, but there was so much data that was left untapped, which, things like sleeping, things like, outside of our training facility, what were these athletes doing? What was I doing? Like, maybe I wasn't going for a run, but maybe I was walking a ton, for a day, or different things like that. But there was so much untapped data. So when, Garmin kind of got into the wearables market, which is just, something you could wear 24/7, and it essentially tracks you all the time, that's really when we started to see some benefits. Like, wow, we could really understand the total load and recovery on an athlete or a human in general. And we could use that, to a much greater extent. And so to kind of fast forward a little bit, once we started using it, our next issue we ran into was we couldn't see people's data. We could look at one person at a time, but what if we had a whole team of people, and we wanted to look at them simultaneously? So we began to kind of work on the software side of things to develop a dashboard that allowed us to see entire populations of people in kind of one view. And so that kind of gets us to where we're at today, where, we now use kind of the Garmin products because it allows us to get that data, but also, gives us all the information we need, which we can get into that stuff. But to answer your question, that's kind of where I want to leave it at that. That's kind of how we got into the Scissors program.
Yeah, that's a great kind of look back, and you hit on a couple really interesting points there that I think are super important, to kind of drill in a bit more. And one of those is this, we're 24/7 humans, we're 24/7 like athletes or whatever, however you identify yourself, we're on at some level 24/7. So from your perspective, when you were going through this ultra marathon training, you were tracking, at least in the very beginning, your runs at some level using Training Peaks, you said, which is a great software and tool, and started to see a need to almost like hack the recovery cycle a little bit, found Rich Roll, kind of explored, and it sounds like had some success with plant-based eating. But again, that was only kind of two legs of a three-legged stool, it sounds like, training, eating, and then obviously the recover aspect. So it sounds like fast forwarding, obviously Garmin, a leader in the endurance market space, from training tools. It sounds like you've kind of then taken this to the next level using wearable technology. And I know we're going to kind of do a little screen share here. But before we do, Aaron, I wanted to kind of get your perspective because, as a coach and someone who is literally writing the programs, like whether it's a fartlek or a tempo or a long distance or whatever, and balancing that also as a physical therapist, someone who often, in clinic is on that recovery side. How do you kind of see these things coming together, and how have you, kind of employed them into your practice?
Yeah, totally. So, I think you both hit on it exactly, how I would approach the answer to that question of the fact that training is really a 24/7 endeavor. Even though when we think of training, we often think of sort of the exercise specific component of that and the time spent actually doing your training session. But that's a very, very, very small part of your overall day and overall training calendar throughout your, your months lead up to your event. And so if you think about all the other decisions that are being made throughout your day-to-day life that are going to impact your ability to perform come race day, those are the sorts of things that we also want to be able to track and measure and make improvements in beyond just your actual training sessions. And so what I've found is that traditional tools that are available to coaches are often focused on getting objective data about that specific training session. But what's cool about Scissors is that it allows us to track other aspects of people's day-to-day life without them having to do anything extra beyond just wear the device as frequently as possible. And the Scissor system does all the work for us, compiles the data and presents it in a very digestible way, and also kind of a modifiable way so that we could really zoom in on specific days to figure out what's going on, or look more broadly to weeks or even months and really see that aggregate data all come together. In my experience, it's been very helpful for myself as an athlete, as well as in coaching athletes, to be better able to determine just how ready someone is to train, how well they're tolerating training, and how their contextual factors, all the other things going on in their life outside of training, is contributing to their day-to-day readiness. And that helps us make the best data-driven decisions about their training. So hopefully that helps. It's been an awesome tool. So thank you to Nick and the innovations team for bringing it to life.
That's awesome. So Aaron, I'm gonna ask Nick to start pulling up his screen, because I do want to give the viewers an opportunity, but I want to dig in a little bit more into a thing you were kind of referencing, and Nick actually said it. With this concept of load management, I know a lot of times our consultants that are out in the field, they're talking about this concept of allostatic load, and I'd like for you to kind of get a little bit or give us a little bit more insight into that, because often we're talking about it in our work with what we call the industrial athlete, or the people that are in the kind of day-to-day, are not elite or Olympic athletes. But from my understanding, and I think some of the things that you've taught me before, it doesn't matter if you're an elite or Olympic athlete or someone who's just, showing up and doing their job every day. We all have to really understand this concept of load management if we want to perform at our highest. If we don't want to get injured and we want to be at our very best. So if you can, while Nick's kind of getting this up, talk to us a little bit about that.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think one of the thoughts that comes to mind as you're speaking there is at Proactivity, we really believe that everyone is an athlete, and that everyone is an everyday athlete. And we try to approach, all populations that we encounter with that mindset, and instill that mindset within them. And so in terms of training load management, you're really thinking about, and specifically allostatic load, the term that you used, it's more than just what you do in training, it's what's going on throughout the rest of your life. And so if you have contextual factors like work stress, relationship stress, perhaps you're a caregiver, perhaps you have, I think I already said things going on at work, whatever the case may be. Stress is stress to our systems, right? To our bodies, and our body has to deal with that day-to-day stress and try to come out on the other side stronger. And so being able to monitor that via the stress scores that Garmin has on their products, as well as with the Body Battery, allows us to make better training decisions. And so like one metric that I will try to educate my athletes on in terms of ways that they could take their own data and kind of become their own coach a little bit is for the Body Battery specifically. It's a score of anywhere from 5% is the lowest, 100% is the highest. And it's basically how much energy you have at any given point of the day. And I generally encourage athletes to have at least a 75% body battery to start their day if they're going to stick to the training plan as written. If their body battery is lower than that, then that might mean that their allostatic load is too high for whatever reason, and we just need to modify that training session a little bit to avoid pushing, to avoid losing balance, so to speak. And so that's one example, and I'll pass it over to Nick now so he can show exactly what that looks like.
Yeah. Can you guys see the screen now?
Sure can.
Okay. Yeah. So, this is essentially what our coaches are looking at. And it really takes, you can see, here we have, a few hundred users on the system, and it really just aggregates everything and puts everything in a simple screen. So we're able to filter this. We can filter by a single individual. We can filter by everybody who's say, if Aaron is the coach, he can filter out by everyone who's his coaching client. And we can even filter out versus company by teams or employers or however you want to gather people. You can look at an entire team population at a time. But it really looks at things, such as exercise minutes, sleep, endure, the stress score. So it's often, Aaron kind of touched on it, misunderstood that, stress, a lot of people think like, oh, but I don't feel stressed out. Like, why is my stress high? Stress, Garmin really uses a measurement of what's called heart rate variability. And heart rate variability is something that, kind of at the simplest form tells us if we're, getting run down. So there's different things that can cause changes in heart rate variability, such as overtraining, under recovery, the type of fuel you're putting in addition to things like being stressed or getting sick. Those can all have an impact. So that's where, we see those stress scores and body battery as well. We have a view that allows us to kind of look at a high level. Each one of those dots is one of our users on the system. Are there any individuals that kind of stand out, from the crowd that maybe they need a little bit of attention for whatever reason? Their numbers are just kind of off, and need just kind of a direct contact from their coach, even though maybe it was unplanned. It's like Aaron has maybe a weekly check-in, but for some reason he's seen one of his people that, just wasn't looking right today, and he decides to reach out to them because the data is telling him to do so.
That's amazing. So obviously this isn't the first time I've seen this, but there's a couple points that I really want to hit on a little bit more. First, as I'm understanding it, Nick, the way you're describing it, this is just an aggregator of tremendous number of people. You've kind of overlaid some of your algorithms to identify when maybe someone is on track or off track, and created a relatively simple way for the coach, someone like Aaron, to kind of zero in maybe off the traditional coaching cycle. I know, having kind of been a little bit more of an involved coach in my younger years, I guess, let's say at this point, we had our regular check-ins, and I might be able to go and log into someone's profile, or they might send me a screenshot, or they might, upload their data from a specific run, and I would talk about, lap speed or whatever, tempo, whatever it is. But this is a 24/7 look into how someone is doing, how someone's performing, how someone's recovering. So certainly that's a pretty cool thing. And the other thing it kind of leads me to I guess ask is, man, this is such an emerging area, an emerging technology. Certainly if you haven't been under a rock, you've been seeing Fitbit, you've been seeing Google, you've been seeing Apple, you've been seeing Whoop, all sorts of different technology and wearable manufacturers really doubling down in this space, especially because of COVID. And I wanted to kind of, I guess, push it to Aaron a little bit and allow him to tell us, how he finds those things a little bit different, I guess. And certainly we're running kind of short on time, so we're like totally scratching the surface. I'm thinking that we're going to need a follow up here, but Aaron, tell us a little bit about, some of the differences you've seen in various technologies you've used.
Sure. The primary technologies I've used in terms of wearables is Garmin products and then Fitbit products. And I've certainly know of many other people who have experimented with Whoop bands and Apple products, and there's many more beyond that. But I find that in terms of endurance athletics, which is the primary population that I'm working with in coaching, Garmin tends to be the preferred product of those types of athletes, probably due to just the functionality and the metrics that the Garmin products track. They tend to go a little bit more in depth of the nuances in terms of the things that you can track with as it relates to endurance performance. Things like your cadence on your runs, things like elevation and your pace, and some of those are pretty standard, but there's going to be some things that are more nuanced, as well as heart rate. Heart rate's a big one, and the Garmin products, particularly if you're using a heart rate monitor chest strap, with your watch, that tends to be, in my experience, much more accurate than using other just products or other things that are solely wrist-based. But beyond that, I think the reason that, primary reason, and Nick could probably speak to this better than I could, but that Proactivity has built their scissors system overlaid by Garmin products is because Garmin allows us to get access to our clients' data once they give us permission to, and then manipulate that data to build these unique dashboards, which provides valuable insights, which you can't do with other companies' data. And so for that reason, I feel like Garmin has been a very valuable partner in this sort of innovations process. And I also find that from an individual user experience, most people I talk to really find their Garmin device to be super comfortable to wear and also provide valuable insights without being overly intrusive. I think the cool thing about Garmin is that it's really designed for the everyday athlete, whereas some of the other products maybe are trying to do, or some of the other companies are trying to cast a broader net. And so some of the user experience of that might feel a little bit intrusive with all of the different applications that are on the device beyond just sort of health and fitness tracking, but the idea that you can also call someone or reply to a text message or take a photo with your camera, like watch. Who knows what you can do on watches nowadays, but I find that if you're really looking for a device that's primarily meant for health and fitness, then the Garmin makes a great product.
Very cool. So Nick, before we kind of wrap up here, give us a little bit of an insider's view into the brain of a Cornell electrical engineer and what you see as some of the exciting things related to, I guess, wearable technology, the scissors system that you've developed. Give us some kind of like, man, I could see this really being cool.
Yeah, so at this point, the system's built on existing research out there. The metrics we know are impacted by these different things. So for example, heart rate variability, heart rate, oxygen saturation, and respiratory rate, as they relate to, say, something like COVID. There's research out there about how if you have COVID, how those things would be impacted. So we're looking at those specific things. The cool thing with what we're doing with scissors is we're getting outcomes, which means when we feed, kind of the computer systems outcomes with some of this background data, the computer systems can begin to tell us some of the things that are important. So there may be things we're not even looking at that may be good indicators of things like viral illness or things like overtraining, or things like injury prediction. There's all kinds of outcomes that we can feed into the computer algorithms. And I know I'm using lots of big words and jargon that's techie stuff. But what's really cool is that, once we get the computer working for us, we may be able to discover some really cool things that this system can cue us into.
That's awesome, man. Well, let's call it a day here, and let's do schedule a follow-up, because I think that we could probably dig a little deeper into the scissors system. Before I kind of sign us off, is there anything you guys wanted to kind of leave fleeting thoughts here?
I would just say if anyone ever has any questions about their training or are dealing with any concerns, never hesitate to reach out to me. I'd be more than happy to be a resource for you.
Awesome, man.
Yeah, and I don't have anything really. The only thing I would say is, you had asked Aaron before, what makes this system different. And besides the device, I think the biggest thing is, our system is one that connects the user, not just with the data, but also with a provider, whether it be a physical therapist or a coach or someone who can help you decipher your data.
Yeah, and I think that's a really good point. Sometimes there's a lot of different wearable technology out there, and I know almost everybody has one on their person at some level, on their wrist or whatever, and it's like information overload almost can become white noise. So connecting, using wearables, passive data collection to connect to coaches or health professionals or medical professionals to really continue to steer us, keep us in the rails of our health and well-being and fitness journey is pretty exciting stuff. So I'll kind of close it there, guys. This is great. I appreciate you taking the time out of your day and all the work you're putting into obviously arming our coaches, Nick, with being able to do the job that they do and do it well, but also setting it up so that other coaches and other providers and other professionals may be able to jump in and align with you and the team's efforts. And Aaron, you know, obviously everything you're doing in the RISE community and for your clients and the collective kind of Proactivity, Main Street, RISE, Basecamp Brands, everybody in supporting, it's been amazing. So it's really great to be with you guys, and I look forward to round 2. All right.
Sounds good.
All right, guys.
Thanks, Eric.
See you. Take it easy.
Take care. Bye-bye.